In this video, we are talking about 20 plus players that are going to be the difference makers from you winning your fantasy football championship or losing. And hopefully you have some of these guys on your roster already who I think are league winners, have the best playoff schedules. We're going to talk about waiver wires, even though it's not great. 5 players, 5 plus players that you need to add. And then on top of that, 5 players that I'm panicking on. I would sell them if you can now, if your trade deadline hasn't passed. So we have a lot going on in this video, so buckle up. We are going to start off with the league winners. First guy on the list is Bucky Irving, and I think he's kind of flying under the radar, which is a massive mistake. I think he's going to set the league on fire the final stretch of the season, and he's clearly Tampa Bay's best running back. Yeah, Rachaad White has looked better as of late, but Irving is the guy in this backfield, and he's scored double-digit fantasy points in 4 out of his last 5 games. He's having success in a limited role, which tells you the type of player he is, the efficiency that he has, the explosiveness that he has. He is, if you just turn on the tape, he's dominant. He just looks like he's moving at a different speed than everyone else. And I would not be surprised with Tampa Bay coming out of their bye. He gets that rookie bump where they get him more involved in the offense. They need him. He's one of their best players on offense. He's very dynamic, and I just think his role is going to increase. Tampa Bay is going to give him more work on the ground, through the air. He can do it all, and the rest of his schedule is very favorable. He gets the Giants, Carolina, horrible defense, Raiders, not a good defense, Chargers, which is an average matchup, and then the Dallas Cowboys, who've really fallen off, and then Carolina again. So if you can buy him low now, if your trade deadline has not passed, I would absolutely be doing so, because I'm betting on a talented player in a good Tampa Bay offense that's going to be able to move the ball more efficiently once Mike Evans returns, which it's looking like that's going to be this week. So I really like Irving to go crazy the final stretch of the season. Next guy up, probably pretty obvious after his Week 11 performance, and that is Ladd McConkey. He's the clear-cut number 1 target for Justin Herbert, who is cooking right now. It's really good to see Herbert finally fully healthy. And we've known this. Justin Herbert, top 10, top 5 NFL quarterback, insanely talented. And I really think Week 11 was the breakout party for the talented rookie. Yes, Ladd had that other blow-up performance a couple weeks prior, but this one really did it for me, because when LA needed him the most, when Herbert needed a big play with under a minute left, who was he looking for consistently? It was McConkey. Everyone else he threw the ball to, incomplete, what have you. Ladd is the guy. He's the number 1 target in this offense. And he's not just a gadget player. He can win all over the field. He can high point the ball. He's explosive after the catch. He's not just this little, he's a smaller receiver, but he plays like he's 6'2 plus. He's just really fun to watch. And the Chargers have a very favorable schedule with plenty of high scoring games on tap. It felt like the beginning of the year, they weren't really throwing the football as much because they were beating these easy teams like the Titans, and they would just run out the clock. That's not going to be the case. That wasn't the case against Cincinnati. And I know they have Baltimore on the schedule and several other really good offenses where they're going to have to throw the ball. And what we saw on Sunday is that when they do so, McConkey is going to be the guy. We see this every year. These rookie wide receivers really get hot the second half of the year. We've already seen it with Ladd. I think it's going to continue. So if you drafted him, if you picked him up on the waiver wire, kudos to you, because he's going to help you win a fantasy title. I truly believe that. Moving on to my next guy, another guy that played on Sunday night, Chase Brown, averaging 24 fantasy points per game since Zach Moss went down. And he's clearly the workhorse back on this electric Cincinnati offense. What Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Brown, what they're doing right now is ridiculous, and they're just not winning football games. It's criminal at this point. But from a fantasy perspective, if you have any of those guys, you are ecstatic. And Brown is averaging a whopping 28 opportunities per game, and he has 22 plus fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games. He's getting Kyren Williams type of usage in an equally good offense that the Rams have. The Bengals might even be a better offense. I think it's pretty close at this point. So again, congrats if you drafted him late. It's really paying off, and he is going to continue to stay hot for the rest of the year. All right, next man up is Bo Nix, who at this point is the definition of league winner. I remember a lot of people, when he got drafted, I believe 11th overall to the Broncos, were like, what is Denver doing? These idiots. And clearly Sean Payton and company knew they had a star in Bo Nix, and he is playing well, not just in fantasy, but in real life, and someone that you likely picked up off of waivers, who is the quarterback for in fantasy since week 8 while racking up 11 touchdowns and 257 yards per game over his last 4 weeks. You didn't see this at the beginning of the year. Like, he didn't plant his feet. He was terribly inaccurate. Something switched. It kind of reminds me of Jordan Love last year, where it was a tale of two seasons. In the beginning of the year, you're like, this guy stinks. And then just something happened. Bo Nix caught fire the same way Love did last year. And that's what we're seeing. And he's playing tremendous football. He doesn't have like a ton of weapons either. Like Cortland Sutton is eating. But outside of that, there's not much else. Doesn't matter. Bo Nix still getting it done. And he is the first rookie ever to complete over 80% of his passes for over 300 yards and throw for 4 touchdowns, which he did in week 11. Absolutely phenomenal. So this guy, you probably can't even trade for him at this point. No one's going to want to give up Nix if he's on their team. But if you have him on your team, nice work. I think he's going to stay scorching hot for the rest of the year. And last up, Tyrone Tracy Jr., another guy that just came out of nowhere. I know he had some hype in training camp. We thought that this might happen, but we didn't know it was going to be this good. With New York handing him the keys to the backfield, Devin Singletary is an afterthought at this point. Tracy has done nothing but flourish. 15.4 fantasy points per game over his last 3 weeks. 21 plus carries in 4 out of his last 5 games. Now I will say, he's still not on a great offense. Daniel Jones, we know now, is benched. Tommy DeVito, can he get it done? Is he going to hurt this offense? Is he going to help this offense? There's a chance he hurts this offense. And they're not in scoring position as often, and Tracy isn't as good. That is potentially what could happen, but I'm betting on talent here with Tracy. I think Tommy DeVito is going to be serviceable. Who knows? He might even be better than Daniel Jones at this point. That's not really hard to do, and he's not going to run the football as much as Daniel Jones did, so maybe that's even more work for Tracy. And his next 3 games are beautiful. Tampa Bay, Dallas, and the Saints. So he's a waiver wire league winner, or if you got him like in the last round of your draft, nice work. Really like Tracy for the rest of the year. Some honorable mentions for you. Jawan Jennings, who is the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco at this point with no Brandon Ayuk. Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is really starting to break out the second half of the year. Let's see if he can keep it up. But even with DK Metcalf back on Sunday, he out-targeted him, outperformed him, and he's just looking like a really good player that we knew he was this whole time. He was one of my favorite guys to draft this offseason. It feels good to see him succeeding, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's see if this continues. Brock Bowers, another obvious league winner. Like, he is Sam Laporta on steroids this year. And then George Pickens, who still had a nice game on Sunday, 8 catches for over 80 yards. I think he keeps it going with Russell Wilson under center. All right, let's move on and talk about 5 guys who have the best playoff schedules, in my opinion, from what I've researched, from what I've found, starting with Chuba Hubbard. He's been a revelation this year and one of the biggest surprises in fantasy football. RB13 in fantasy points per game, and he's thriving on a pretty bad Carolina offense. Bryce Young will likely be the quarterback 1 for the rest of the year, and he's still getting it done. Yes, rookie running back Jonathan Brooks likely going to make his season debut in Week 12, but they're going to ease him in. He's coming off that torn ACL. There's no real rush for Brooks at this point. Carolina, they're going nowhere this season. Why injure your second-round pick, right? So Brooks will be involved, but after that contract that Chuba just got from Carolina, I would be shocked if Jonathan Brooks does really anything this year. This is Hubbard's backfield. Brooks will be in that Miles Sanders role, 5 to 8 touches maybe a game, which isn't going to do anything to Hubbard's value. So he's going to continue rolling. He has 20 plus fantasy points in back-to-back games and a beautiful playoff schedule. Dallas, Arizona, and Tampa Bay. Those are 3 teams that you can run all over. So really like Chuba Hubbard the rest of the year, and especially in the fantasy playoffs. Next guy up, got to talk about him, even though it hasn't been great for him, is DJ Moore. Looks like maybe the season could be saved for this offense from a fantasy perspective. I don't think the Bears are going to do much this year from an NFL perspective, but firing Shane Waldron was the best thing for this offense. We already saw with Thomas Brown as the new offensive coordinator that this offense just looked light years better in Week 11 against the Packers, who are a pretty good defense, even though Jair Alexander re-injured that knee, didn't return the second half. But still, this Packers defense is legit. Caleb Williams looked like a completely different quarterback out there. He didn't look frustrated. He was getting those easy yards, those easy first downs with his athleticism, with his legs. I don't know why he wasn't doing that more, but that is the key to this offense. If they can just move the football and not overcomplicate it for the rookie quarterback. But from a more perspective, they really wanted to get DJ involved early and often. Yes, he was on those screen passes, but we'll take it in PPR, and he was picking up chunks as well. So I think that this offense is going to be better under Brown. I think Williams is still a really good quarterback who's going to thrive under this new system. And that's good news for DJ Moore, arguably the most talented receiver on the team. He's going to have better days ahead. We needed to see a game like this. I believe he had 7 for 70 or 6 for 70. If he would have had another 4 for 30 game, you might consider dropping him. But he didn't. The arrow is pointing up for this offense. Even though they lost on that heartbreaking blocked field goal by the Packers, the playoff schedule for Moore is great. Minnesota, who you can throw all over. Detroit, they're going to be playing catch up against the Lions, who don't have a great secondary, and then Seattle. So those are 3 potentially high-scoring games against average at best secondary. So I like DJ Moore. He's a guy you could buy for cheap. I think he has a very good end of the year. All right, moving on to Breece Hall. Finally, Breece Lightning is back. Had his best game of the season in Week 11, over 100 total yards, 2 touchdowns, resulting in 31 fantasy points. He looked a little bit different. I don't know if he was dealing with an injury early on. He looks a little bit more explosive. He looks like he can burn guys towards the end of plays. Like in the beginning, he just looked like he kind of ran out of gas, maybe because he was hurt. I don't know, but he looks like Breece Hall from the end of last year. He's really talented. He's playing fantastic. It's unfortunate because this Jets offense is horrendous. Aaron Rodgers looks horrible. It's just terrible news. I mean, Breece Hall, we know he can thrive on bad offenses with Zach Wilson last year, so I think his fantasy stock will be okay, but they're not sustaining drives, which is hurting his overall value, his overall production, his overall volume. I'm optimistic just because of the talent that we know he has, the opportunities that he's getting in this offense, and he's a guy that you're starting regardless, right? This is just more a feel-good if you have Breece Hall on your roster, or if you can potentially still buy him, I would be doing so. Great playoff schedule. Jacksonville, Rams, and then Buffalo. 3 teams you can run all over. Breece is looking like vintage Breece. Maybe this Jets offense will figure it out. They seem like they're all over the map. A couple series, they look really good, and then Aaron Rodgers throws a pick, what have you. I think he'll be fine, and I really like his schedule. Moving on to Malik Neighbors, a guy that I'm kind of down on right now. A guy that you probably can buy for pretty low, I would say, at this point. I think people are maybe a little bit discouraged because he hasn't been great over the last 3 or so games. He's cooled off drastically ever since the Giants lost stud left tackle Andrew Thomas. And now with Daniel Jones being benched, there's a lot of question marks. What is this passing game going to look like? What is this offense going to look like with the Tommy DeVito experience? It could be an upgrade or it could be a disaster. So you could maybe buy low on a lot of question marks, the underperforming play from Neighbors. This situation is pretty much like Breece Hall. You're betting on a talented player with an easy playoff schedule as they get Baltimore, Atlanta, and then the Colts in the fantasy championship. So Neighbors could get hot to close out the year. Someone that I'd be trying to get on my team, or if you have him on your roster, hold out hope that he gets hot in the fantasy playoffs when it matters the most. And then lastly, Jaden Reed, who had a nice game in Week 10 and then kind of came back down to earth in Week 11. He started off scorching hot to begin the year with Jordan Love, and then Jordan Love got hurt, didn't do much with Malik Willis, and then he's just been very inconsistent since Love has been back. He's had some bigger games, then some duds, and then bigger games. He's kind of hard to trust, but that's what's going to happen when you're a receiver on a loaded Green Bay offense that just has so many weapons, especially in this passing game. It can't be the same guy every week. This past week, it was Christian Watson. Maybe next week, it'll be Romeo Doubs. Maybe it'll be Reed. We don't really know, but I'm betting on an uber-talented player on an elite Green Bay offense attached to a superstar quarterback in Jordan Love. And from Week 14 on, his schedule is great. Detroit, Seattle, Saints, and then Minnesota in the fantasy championship. We like that. Buy low if you still can on Reed because he could go off when you need him the most. All right, let's move on to some waiver wire ads for this week heading into Week 12. Remember, don't get complacent. Maybe pick up a guy if you know your opponent needs him. If your trade deadline hasn't passed, then try to trade it to him. Always be picking guys up. Always be active on the waiver wire because you don't know when a guy's going to go off or someone on your team is going to get hurt, whatever it may be. So here are my favorite ads for this week. In no real particular order, Quentin Johnson, if he's somehow available in your league, needs to be added. Christian Watson, I like Tank Bigsby, even though he didn't play last week. Travis Etienne did nothing with his opportunities. Trevor Lawrence should be back at some point, so that could help Bigsby. I like Elijah Moore because Jameis Winston is just chucking the football. Roshan Johnson for the Bears with Thomas Brown as OC. Johnson got more work. Cam Akers with Aaron Jones in Minnesota, not doing much with his opportunities, and also has an injury history. So does Akers, but Akers would be the insurance to Jones, so he needs to be added. Anthony Richardson had a monster performance. He needs to be added. We know the talent that Richardson has. He's going to continue to run the football. I think he's going to play well the rest of the year. So if you need a quarterback, go get him. And then 2 tight ends, Will Dissly, who has a great rapport with Justin Herbert, and Hunter Henry, who Drake May seems to love. They have a nice connection as well. So those are some guys I would be adding on the waiver wire. Not awesome options, but remember, stay active. Don't get complacent. Block your opponents. Still be picking up guys if you have space. And then my top 2 backs to be stashing right now, Trey Benson, rookie running back for the Arizona Cardinals, and Blake Corum, rookie running back for the Rams. Those are my top 2 stashes. You're stashing running backs at this point. You're not really stashing receivers. So those would be my top guys. And then moving on to some guys that I'm panicking a little bit on. I'd be fine selling them if you still can. Deebo Samuel, he looks like the second, third option in this passing game. Is he going to have these big Deebo games? Of course. It's just hard to predict. He's very inconsistent. Jalen Waddle apparently lost his job to Jonnu Smith. Just seems like Jonnu Smith is the number 2, number 3 target in this Miami offense. You could say it's Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane, Jonnu Smith, and then Jalen Waddle. Waddle has done nothing. It's been terribly disappointing. I understood why he wasn't performing when Tua was hurt, but Tua is back and he's still doing nothing. I just don't get it. I would be trying to sell him if you still can. Jonathan Taylor getting a ton of work, but not doing a lot with it. He looked like he banged up his ankle. Potentially, we know his history with ankle injuries. Makes me nervous. Anthony Richardson is back. Good vulture touchdowns. Don't love Jonathan Taylor the rest of the year. He's going to get the volume, but I don't know if he's going to do much with it. Aaron Jones, who had that really hot streak middle part of the season, but he has looked kind of bad. I don't know if it's because he's injured with those ribs. Just an older running back that's starting to decline, but don't really like Aaron Jones at this point. Kyron Williams will be up next. Don't sell Kyron. Obviously, he's an elite player on an elite offense, but with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp rolling right now, there's just not enough for Kyron. He hasn't scored in 3 straight games after that insane touchdown streak. It's because Cooper and Nacua are eating. They're scoring all the touchdowns, and there's just no room for Kyron. So don't sell Kyron, but he gets a little bit of a hit. Make sure you're rostering Blake Corum. Stash him away like we just talked about. Corum had his season high touches in week 11, I do believe. So that's notable. He needs to be on your bench. Kareem Hunt looked terrible in week 11. I would be selling him. I told you guys to sell him a couple weeks ago because we know Pacheco is going to be back. Hunt has not been efficient, explosive. He's just been surviving on volume. And when he doesn't see volume, he is going to lay a dud. So if you can still sell Hunt, I would be doing so. Travis Etienne, like we talked about earlier, did nothing with his opportunities on Sunday. He might be one of the bigger busts in all of fantasy drafts this year. I would not drop him, but he just has to rot on your bench, unfortunately, at this point. I don't think anyone's going to want to trade for him. And then Tony Pollard, another guy who is kind of declining a little bit on a bad Tennessee Titans offense. Tajay Spears suffered that concussion, and Tony Pollard still couldn't do much of anything. So those are guys I'm panicking on. I would be trying to trade them away if someone is interested. I know a lot of trade deadlines have passed, so if that's the case, then there's not much you can do. You just kind of have to ride it out. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you took away anything from the video, if you can please like the video, subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.